Hi, welcome. We're going to allow people to join, people coming in, give it just a minute or so before we get started. We need some music, Mike.
I know we've talked about that a little bit.
Hi, for those who are starting to come in, we're going to give it a few minutes or at least a minute, allow people to fully enter into the session before we get started. Thank you for your patience.
All right, let's kick it off. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Future HR Professional, Career Growth and Development in an Era of Disruption. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All participants are muted. Please note that this session is being recorded, so if you do not wish to be recorded, please hang up now. If you have any questions during the presentation, we'd love to hear them. Please type them into the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel. We have made some time at the end to answer questions. And if you have any technical issues, please reach out to Chelsea or I directly via the chat and we'll help you. A copy of today's presentation slides and the recording will be available to our members on the Research and Sensing platform. And for our non-members, we'll also make these materials available to you by visiting our Research and Sensing test drive site. Again, I'll share those links to both platforms in our chat. With that, let's jump in and get started. So thanks for your interest and for joining our session today. We decided on this topic because HR is in a transformation phase. And Chelsea and I have really been getting a lot of questions around HR capabilities and new roles. So by way of introductions, my name is Mike Kemp, and I'm the lead research analyst on the topic of HR in Deloitte's Human Capital Research and Sensing Group. So my research really focuses on the HR function itself, HR strategy, HR capabilities, design, and leadership. I'm based out of Pittsburgh, and my background is in IO psychology with an emphasis on analytics and market research. And I have the pleasure of being joined today by my amazing friend and colleague, Chelsea Taylor. So I'll pass the mic for her to introduce herself and cover our agenda for today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you this evening or this morning, depending on where you might be. Like Mike said, my name is Chelsea Taylor. I'm based out of our Dallas office and have been with the organization for about 3.5 years now. My role in the organization is to serve as an advisor to our research in the learning and career and performance space. And so ultimately what I hope to help achieve today alongside Mike is to leverage our research that we have in the learning and career space in order for you to turn it around and think about it for you as a learner and how you can progress through your own career and some of the capability requirements that might be available or needed for you from the HR standpoint. So looking very forward to this conversation, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're gonna be working through today. So it seems like a lot, but it actually flows really nicely. We had one earlier today where Mike is going to start us off by talking a little bit about the future of HR. Some of it you may be aware of, some of it may be new. We want to talk about where we are and why we're going in this direction that we're going into, as well as some of the mandates that we have found are really imperatives for the HR function now and again into the future. But what does that mean for us? How can we imagine how we are bringing the best level of service and performance to our organization so that we're all working together on the outcomes that are needed for our organization to succeed? And then kind of move us into the art of the possible for you as an HR professional. How do we future-proof HR for success, and thinking about the critical capabilities that we really need to be looking at for ourselves? And how do you do that through yourself being a modern learner who is very distracted and overwhelmed and understandably quite busy? But we need to kind of put our learner hats on every once in a while and think about how we drive our careers in HR. And really, that's how we want to close this out. Of course, Michael finished us off with some great takeaways, and like he mentioned early on, have some Q&A. So we have opportunities for you all to ask questions. Again, don't feel like you have to wait until the end to put those into the Q&A section. We're happy to answer them along the way, or have a standing list going so we're ready at the end with any questions you might have.
Awesome. So let's dive in. What I'm going to cover for you today, and Chelsea mentioned, is really the context and the landscape within which HR professionals are developing and managing their careers. So understanding what's going on in the landscape and in the industry that we're in is really the best tool to defining where and how you grow your career, especially in this field that is really changing rapidly, and the world is changing around us. So not only, is all of this change, all of this disruption affecting our personal lives, but the business landscapes we work in, and really the opportunities HR professionals have in the future. One of the quotes that I really like is from Graham Wood, who said, "Change has never happened this fast before, and it will never be this slow again." So with that quote to kind of provide us with some context, we'll dive in to see, what's happening today. And so there are many factors changing the world of work. And here at Deloitte, we think about 3 areas of focus in the HR space. So we think about the work, the workplace, and the workforce. And what you see listed are the most significant disruptors to those areas. So quickly, technology is everywhere. And really its adoption has been exponential. Over 6 billion people around the world use a smartphone. So they have immediate access to the internet, all of the information that it holds, as well as global access to each other. There's a tsunami of data. In the last 2 years, 9 times more data has been generated than what was available in the entire history of mankind. That alone is just mind-blowing. What do we do with all of that data? In 2008, it would cost a company on average $500,000 to institute AI or cognitive computing and robotics. Last year, it cost a company on average about $22,000. So big difference there, as these technologies are really getting cheaper and easier to incorporate into our organization and business. And as a result, jobs are becoming vulnerable. They're really being automated. These technologies are also creating new job opportunities. So how are we tackling that? Across the globe, there's been an outcry for social justice and equity, and workers are really looking to their employers to make the right decisions and to do the right things. We're seeing the nature of careers changing. So right now, there are 5 generations currently in the workforce. Millennials make up the majority of that, but the segment that's showing the most growth are those that are 55 years and older. So what's interesting is folks are choosing to continue working later in life. And how do we account for that? There's been an explosion in the contingent workforce. So it's estimated that in 2020, 40% of the workforce had some type of self-employment through contract work, gig work, or freelancing. We're also seeing what we call the social enterprise, or the rise of the social enterprise, in which companies are really feeling pressured to expand their consumer and shareholder value to include things like environmental and social activities. More than ever, business leaders need to consider how to advance society and leverage business models for social good, not just provide profits and revenues. And if that isn't enough, I'll circle back to the global pandemic. and leave you to consider the way in which you personally and your organization was impacted in terms of the work you do, your workplace, and the workforce. Think about the colleagues that you connect with day in and day out. So what does this mean for the HR function? And what does this mean for us as HR professionals? What it means is HR has an opportunity to lead the business forward in this environment of change and disruption. So if the global pandemic has shown us anything, it's that work and workforce issues are critical business issues. HR strategies that were previously considered administrative are now being recognized as core parts of the business strategy. And organizations are looking to be more flexible, adaptable, and resilient to constant change. And that happens in the workforce. So in 2019, in our Human Capital Trends Survey, more than 8 out of 10 respondents, and that's not just HR folks, that's business leaders as well, felt that the ability to lead through complexity and ambiguity was the most important requirement for 21st century leadership. This was even before we experienced the complexity and ambiguity that the year 2020 threw at us. So what does this mean for HR? It means that we have the opportunity to be an indispensable driver of change across the organization, helping to cultivate the right type of leadership that really can in turn empower a workforce and organization that is resilient and able to adapt to this constant change through things like problem solving and creativity. And you might be saying, yeah, that sounds great, Mike. But how do we do that? And what does this have to do with my career development as an HR professional? And I promise you, we're getting there. Let's start with the how HR can be an indispensable driver of change for the business. So in light of those 9 disruptions I mentioned and the opportunity to lead the enterprise forward and thriving in this era of constant change, our research has identified 10 new mandates that are significantly impacting HR functions across markets and industries today. So I'll briefly kind of discuss each of them, but for more information, there's an in-depth article in which we outline sort of the implications of each mandate for HR professionals, as well as more broadly across the organization. We've made this article available to both our members on the Research and Sensing platform and to our non-members on the Test Drive site. So we've shared the links in the chat to those platforms, and feel free to access that article if what you hear is interesting. With that, let's dive in and look at our first mandate, which is about sensing shifts. So first and foremost, to identify, understand, and really stay ahead of all the change that we're talking about, HR professionals, as well as the broader business, we must use data to sense shifts, both internally in our organizations and externally. So our research on high impact HR functions shows that high performing functions defined by both business and workforce outcomes, those organizations that are retaining employees and have high engagement, but also are growing into new market and meeting financial targets. Those are what we call high impact functions. Those at the high end are 5 times as likely to use data to make informed decisions compared to low performing HR functions. So within HR, it's about doing more than just our annual engagement survey. We need to understand the internal and external context in which the workforce exists and really in which change happens. We've got to create processes to sense shifts in real time in order to react to them. The next mandate is really about empowering change. So we've already talked about change. HR has a unique opportunity to help organizations find new ways to adapt to and proactively drive change, really through the workforce. So to empower change, we as HR professionals, we've got to shift our thinking from operational to strategic. So we've got to do more than ensure compliance with process. We've got to view ourselves as a model for change, wherein if we can effectively drive change within the HR function, we can act as an expert and really as a catalyst for change across the enterprise. As you'll see for all of these mandates, the implications for the HR function is really aligned with the implications for the broader enterprise. So for HR professionals to empower change across the enterprise, we first need to build that credibility by driving change within our own function, and then focus on influencing and developing leaders who embrace and empower change across the business. HR should champion change both formally and informally through appropriate practices and programs, but also culturally, it's about building a growth mindset and a resilience to change. So related to change is the next one, innovation. And we've been talking about innovation for years. But what does this mean now? So innovation is at the heart of how businesses can adapt to and really take advantage of change in the markets. Innovation is how we create change and disruption in our markets. So for the HR function, we should be looking for opportunities to innovate under our own roof, be a catalyst for that innovation across the enterprise. And so we've got to champion a culture that supports innovation. That means creating psychological safety, enabling people to take risks, incentivizing innovation efforts. We've got to develop leaders as a big part of this cultural shift. But we should also be thinking about how we leverage diversity and inclusion, access new perspective, and also use data to help spark new ideas. So innovation has really sparked the digital revolution. We hear a lot about digital transformation these days, and technology is changing the way we live within and outside of work. Becoming digital is not a one-time transformation. It's really about continuously evolving the use of technology and data for greater efficiency and effectiveness. So we do this in our personal lives. Just think about what new technology or what new app has changed your life, even slightly over the past year. Within HR, we can act as a model and a catalyst by leveraging technology and data under our own roof, and then building that culture of technological curiosity, building digital savvy and data literacy, and implementing platforms and practices to enable HR through data. And we also need to consider, how do we weave our HR technology strategy into the broader organization's IT technology strategy? So our research on high impact HR functions, again, shows that high performing HR functions are 2.5 times more likely to be leading their organization's digital transformation, not just reacting to change happening outside of the function. The next mandate is about accessing talent, enabling the enterprise to put the right people in the right place at the right time. So this is about agility. It's not just about acquiring talent externally and fighting for talent with your competitors. It's really about creating mechanisms to identify and deploy talent, both externally and internally. So what does this mean for us as HR professionals? We should be looking for ways to implement team-based, agile talent processes. Accessing talent is also about talent mobility within the organizations. So we, from the HR perspective, should be creating platforms to identify and move talent, as well as shifting the culture to avoid things like talent hoarding, recognizing and incentivizing leaders who develop and share talent across the enterprise. Accessing talent, it's also about looking for opportunities to leverage the alternative or contingent workforce. So how do we kind of tap into contract workers, gig workers, freelancers? So this mandate, I think, represents the golden opportunity for HR to really step up and help drive the type of change that delivers real value back to the business. Because most organizations haven't figured out how to really harness the power of internal mobility, or really the power of the alternative workforce. And so that brings us to reskilling the workforce. I think the point that I want to make here are skills are increasingly becoming outdated at a faster and faster pace, particularly where businesses are implementing technology and automation into work processes. This is because the pace of change in the environment is happening so quickly. So it's estimated that 50% of today's work activities are expected to be automated by 2030. And there's a lot of fear in that automation will replace humans and jobs. However, our research has shown that less than 1 in 7 organizations think that automation is going to result in significant job eliminations in their organization. So what should people be doing if their jobs are increasingly automated? And the answer is they should be focused on human capabilities that machines can't replace. So things like problem solving, creativity, empathy. And I know Chelsea's going to talk a little bit more about this and how it applies to career growth as an HR professional in a bit. Many people are looking to their employers for more than a paycheck these days. Among other things, they're looking to connect with really the broader purpose of their business out in society and to use their work to enhance the sense of meaning in their lives. Unfortunately, we see that year in and year out, engagement data continues to show us that most employees are not engaged at work, and many are actively disengaged. So couple this with the fact that technology is not just impacting the way work gets done, it's also impacting the employee experience. And it's clear that organizations need to consciously design workforce experiences, those that are more personalized and meaningful in order to attract and engage a high-performing workforce. Switching gears to driving an inclusive culture, I know that this is top of mind for many organizations. So we've mentioned D&I a few times, or DE&I already, and it's no secret that having a diverse workforce provides both breadth and depth of ideas. It's the key to sparking innovation and change. And to be clear, I'm talking about more than demographic diversity. It's about diversity of thoughts, experiences, and mindsets. Diversity is wasted if it doesn't exist in an inclusive culture. And so we think, inclusion, our research has shown that there's really 4 things that are critical here: a safe and open environment, a feeling of respect and equality, employees feeling empowered and able to grow, and lastly, a sense of being valued and belonging. One thing I'm seeing more and more of is creating ecosystems. Again, with this rapid pace of change, we see businesses collaborating more and more and creating partnerships in order to really access resources and create opportunities across borders. Yeah, I believe this mega trend of mergers and acquisitions it's going to start to wane. And rather, businesses are going to start focusing on forming mutually beneficial alliances instead of just gobbling each other up. So within the function, it's about partnering with third-party services. We can't do everything under our own roofs. And this trend is only going to grow and continue to see more and more alliances and ecosystems, which creates an opportunity for HR professionals to help both the function and the broader organization be proactive in creating these alliances and really creating these networked ecosystems. And then our last mandate is about balancing business and societal outcomes. So I had mentioned the social enterprise. Again, what this is referring to is this expectation or pressure from consumers and society for organizations to create value beyond just a product or a service at cost. This is that pressure for organizations to take a stance and have a vested interest in improving the conditions for humanity. We see that consumers have access to more information and lots of choices, and certainly across the globe now. And all they need to do is push a button and get all these choices. So brand means everything, including employment brand, where potential customers or future employees can get access to platforms like LinkedIn or Glassdoor and crowdsource that working experience. We say this is balanced because if a company only focuses on social things, then they're probably going to lose a lot of profits and revenues and not be very sustainable. On the flip side, if a company only focuses on profits and revenues in the business side, they're probably going to lose out on customers due to those things that I just talked about. So it's about having that balance. So that was all 10. And we kind of blew through that really quickly. But again, we'll have this recording, and if you want to learn more, there's certainly an article out there on our site that you can check out. With all of these disruptions, and certainly with these mandates, we've got a lot of work to do in HR. And there's opportunities for us to elevate the value that we provide back to the business. But where do we go from here? So I just want to take a few minutes to talk about what new opportunities and roles are really emerging for HR professionals. And just really quickly, I think one thing we've got to do is take on new characteristics, both as a function and as professionals. So here at Deloitte, we've identified that HR professionals should adopt these 4 things, both as a mindset, as well as figure out how do we incorporate into this into how we do things in the function, our structures, our operating models, our processes, and technology. Really quickly, adaptability is about continuously gathering data to understand what's going on around you and adapt to that. Agility is about moving quickly. All too often, we create a process or program and we spend hours, days, weeks, months trying to perfect that. But the truth is, in the world of change, it's never going to be perfect. So how do we fail fast and learn faster? Architecting is about purposely working, designing, and delivering with a human centricity, but thinking about the experience and outcomes of our audience. And then augmented is about becoming digital, using technology to elevate human capabilities. We know true differentiators in business are the people things. It's the creativity, the innovation, the empathy, the problem solving. So how do we use technology to get more out of those human capabilities? And where we see organizations adopting these characteristics, we also see their operating models changing. And so, traditionally we've had sticks and boxes, and that's being replaced by these open networks of individuals and teams. So we're seeing silos within HR being broken down, so the very parts of the function can come together to deliver on higher level outcomes. With this constant change, there's constantly new problems to solve. So we need to shift resources and address new issues. And people need to know where to go for information. So I'm not saying just abandon the operating model altogether, but it's more about creating these network groups of teams so that information and resources can be shared quickly and easily. So getting to kind of what this means to you as an HR professional, all of this providing context is to show that we're seeing new roles and opportunities emerge in the HR function. I'm not going to go through each of these, but as you can see, they mirror the external trends and the internal mandates that I just talked about. If we think about the experience, the chief data officer, director of well-being, here at Deloitte, we just created a new position, the chief purpose officer. So we have someone at that executive level who's tasked with focusing on and driving a sense of purpose in Deloitte's workforce, connecting employees to the organization's overall mission and values. And that's also speaks to, that well-being aspect. And so the last thing that I just want to bring up, the last point that I'd like to talk about, if we can get the slides there, is really about how HR is changing. So again, you may have expected sort of this list of skills you need to learn, or me to highlight the experiences that you need to have, or advice on the connections you need to make in order to advance your career as an HR professional. But the truth is, there's no magic one size fits all pill. There's no secret path to advancing your career. HR is changing, and I think we as HR professionals can see the future as ambiguous and scary, and we can wait to be told what to do next. Or we can see the future as really an open opportunity and an invitation to carve our own path. So I started this webinar talking about kind of the context, the environment that's causing the function to change, new mandates to deliver on. And perhaps we can call that, what are those opportunities and directions you can take? What's the landscape of HR and the operating model? So there's no single ladder to climb here anymore. And Chelsea kind of keyed me into this analogy, which I want to share back with you. And I'm going to steal this from you, Chelsea. The career profession for HR is not about climbing a ladder anymore. It's like rock climbing. It's like a rock climbing wall. There are lots of different ways to get to the top, and some of them may be marked and some of them are not, but you have the opportunity to carve your own path. And understanding what's happening in the field and where the field is going, my goal was to help you see the opportunities and paths in this wall that you have options to take. So with that as inspiration, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to talk about where you really as an HR professional can go from here to start or continue that career journey. Chelsea?
Thanks so much, Mike. And you can steal anything, anytime. I steal stuff from you all the time. So like Mike mentioned, our real goal here is to help you understand everything that Mike has just spoken through in the last 25 minutes of this presentation, and really bring it to action for yourself, and move into the concepts that we're talking about as how they can apply to you, even though knowing everyone's going to be a little bit different. We can't give you, like Mike said, the perfect path and this is the silver bullet for being successful. We can give you some tools that we hope will help future-proof you for success by putting different things to work. And in the first context that we're going to talk about is really around this idea of what some of you may have heard me talk about, or some of my colleagues talk about before, as far as enduring human capabilities and skills. So what I'll say just generally about our career research, and this is not specific to HR, but overall, very similarly to what Mike mentioned about the rock climbing wall, is that as career paths are replaced by some of these more less rigid, more career progression type conversations, we are seeing a much greater emphasis on development, this idea of experience collecting or attribute building, rather than always focusing on that really upward, or maybe it's not even upward, but very rigid mobility. And so it has this movement that is certainly not a straight line, and many times isn't necessarily going upward at all, but it's going to kind of ebb and flow in order to be agile enough to take on whatever disruptions may be appearing before us. And so with that, as I start to talk a little bit about this idea of human capabilities and skills, I want to be really clear that this is not meant to articulate that skills are not important. It's actually the opposite of that. But what we do hope to achieve in this conversation is helping you understand that skills alone aren't necessarily going to get us there. When we're talking about skills in this particular sense, and HR skills more specifically, these are really kind of the tactical types of knowledge or expertise that's needed to achieve work outcomes, and they're very much within a specific context. These could be business and functional type skills, and they could be more technical or scientific, but overall, the important thing about skills is thinking of them as a little bit more context-based. And if we've got this idea that, based on the first part of what Mike was telling us with disruptions, our context is changing all the time. And so you might find that not only your workforce, but even yourself, if you flip it back on yourself for a second, you are finding yourselves needing to continuously to reskill and do things differently. And we're kind of on this hamster wheel of sorts where we just can't keep up. And so what we are advocating for is to help people navigate this new world of work. I like to use the surfing analogy here, and my apologies for a metaphor so quickly after the rock climbing metaphor, but I found out fairly recently, because I am not a surfer, that if oftentimes, contrary to what movies are showing us, surfers are not riding a single wave from the minute they catch the wave all the way into shore. Oftentimes, they'll ride a wave for a moment, stop riding that one and find a different one and ride several waves before they come all the way in. So how can we be more comfortable with moving from one short wave to the next in order to still get everything that we need to get and be successful? Surfers, or in this case, human capabilities driven HR folks. And that's what it ultimately comes back to, is these human attributes that can help amplify skills. And we'll talk about a little bit more about how that does that. But these capabilities that I'm talking about are observable human attributes that are ultimately demonstrated independent of context. They are universally applicable. And they can be nurtured. So they're typically things that can be developed over time through experience, versus sometimes with skills you can teach those perhaps in a training course or in a conference setting. Human capabilities aren't quite that easy. They do tend to be innate. They're attributes that people are born with that are cultivated and amplified over time. The key here, and why I want to call this out as we're talking about the development of the HR professional, is that you don't teach these HR capabilities. We have a chance to practice and nurture our capabilities, and they're like muscles. They do get stronger with practice. All of the capabilities that are out there, I might not be great at, because like muscles, when we aren't using them, they tend to atrophy. But bringing awareness to them and thinking about them in the context of how it helps us achieve our outcomes can actually help to then move over into the amplification of any kind of skills, so that we're working both within and without the context that sometimes we cannot control. So just a quick visual on this. We believe that when they're nurtured and able to manifest, these enduring human capabilities, when coupled with outcomes, actually amplify or can be multipliers for skills. And they're leverageable across skills and across contexts. And we recommend that maybe that's where we put a little bit more focus than we have in the past about how we help ourselves as HR professionals and help our colleagues as HR professionals. And so, an example of this might be this idea of the pandemic. And I hate to throw it out there because I feel like it's probably a very cliched example at this point, a year in, but it is a very real example where there's a lot of things that have come into play that were based on the pandemic hitting very, very quickly. And the argument that is, if we're only focusing on skills in this regard, and we're only thinking about how we do skills in the context that was pre-pandemic, and hadn't necessarily focused on some of the capabilities. In this case, I'm using innovation as an enduring human capability example. If we had been cultivating that, the likelihood that we could pivot very quickly to meet the skills and context needed in maintaining productivity through a pandemic is a little bit higher, because we were already working through some of the capabilities that would need us to pivot very quickly. Now, I know it's a quick example, and it was just one example. One of the things that we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to hear a little bit more about actually ties back to some of those mandates that Mike told us about earlier on. And these are the critical capabilities that we do see coming out for many HR professionals based on some of the mandates, based on where their businesses are driving them. So it's not an all-inclusive list necessarily, but it's a really good starting point for how you might want to wrap your mind around moving forward for your own career. When we talk about this ambidextrous piece, we're really talking about the ability for a professional to apply practices and engage and motivate a blended team, a team of folks that may be full-time, or they could be part-time or contract workers. They might be multi-generational. There could be robotics in the mix or AI that is all a part of your team, and bringing all of this together in order to accomplish the goals that the team needs there, and therefore is going to be helping the organization as a whole. When we're talking about the igniter, I'm moving to the left a bit. Here we're just talking about the capability of being able to assemble and bring together network of teams that can rally around a cause and deliver business solutions. So really being that, whether you call it an igniter, a cheerleader, something that really drives instead of standing back and waiting for things to happen. The data obsessed one is quite honestly a little uncomfortable for me as a lifelong HR practitioner, but I think it's absolutely something that we've got to be thinking about. We don't have to all be data scientists by any means, but the more that we can garner some passion around data and understand and use data to anticipate issues, to identify opportunities, to diagnose things, to test ideas, and ultimately to design and improve solutions, the better off we're going to be, not only for our future, but also for the future of our workforce. And so it may mean that we understand enough to be able to tell a story and understand what data is telling us, and we call in the troops and maybe are a little bit more working the ambidextrous capability to bring in the right people at the right time. But it is a focus on data that is fairly new in the grand scheme of things for an HR professional. HR professionals also have to be purposeful. And it sounds very simple, but because so much of what we're doing and what we need to do is really driving forward in a whole lot of disruption, we've got to make sure that we're helping to ensure every team and every individual of a team understands the purpose, understands an anticipated outcome and a goal in everything that they do, so that you're encouraging and actually empowering and coaching teams to achieve that shared ambition. And then the last one on the left there on the bottom of customer-centric, I highly doubt is new to those of us in HR, whether our customers are primarily all internal or we've got some external customers. The focus on customers and their needs and where that starts and ends for everything that we do is absolutely still very critical and not going away. If I take it back to the top and talk about the integrator, it kind of flows in nicely with some of the ambidextrous and team igniter piece, but an integrator is operating with the complete story in mind. They're understanding and identifying connections so that they can create bridges and seamless experiences for the workforce. So kind of the flip side of being data obsessed is also being more digitally literate. We want and we notice that organizations who embrace a digital world with the capability to envision and build new models, new tools, and new ways of working, all informed by the digital revolution that we've been in for the last several years, are more impactful than those who try to fight against it. So considering ways that digital capabilities can actually enhance our teams and integrate and ignite some of the other things that we might have always done just with people and tasks alone is what we're really thinking about here. Innovative thinkers are constantly considering and investigating new ways to perform work and deliver value. And I don't, again, think that that's necessarily anything new. Today, it's almost impossible to look at a list of capabilities without innovation being included somehow in the mix. When we're talking about entrepreneurial capabilities, This is a real relentlessness in exploring opportunities and tackling problems and implementing new ways of working in order to achieve better outcomes. The same way of doing things without questioning the assumptions around, is this actually the best way, is a really big loss if we're not thinking about that with an entrepreneurial spirit. And then finally, action oriented. Again, nothing new, but this capability means that we're leaning into the execution of the things that we're doing with accountability. We're testing and we're learning, and we're using all of that to iterate on the design and development and to be very agile in some of the things that we're trying to push out or help along in the journey of our workforce. So I've said a lot there, and I think this piece of our talk around capabilities can go much deeper, and happy to continue any conversations with members about these. But I want to bring this to action a little bit more in kind of flipping the script on how we talk to our learning leaders about the learner in the modern world, and actually having you think about yourself as a modern learner. We've talked about some of the implications of those 10 mandates. We've identified some of the capabilities in HR, but we really have to make sure that we're thinking about how we're going to do this from the standpoint that we are evolving and we're growing and learning. Our modern learning research has told us that we are all very overwhelmed and distracted and impatient as modern learners. It's very difficult for us to pull ourselves out of the work and do some learning and then get back into the work. So the expectation that you're going to be able to do that in order to be successful for the future is understandably unrealistic. What we have found in our research is that the more that we can allow learning to be in the flow of work, the more that we can move ourselves and think about things outside of traditional learning modalities, the better off that we're going to be in terms of being able to learn and evolve at a faster pace than has ever been needed before. So as you're thinking about what you might want your journey to look like as far as the capabilities of moving forward, I don't want anyone to feel like it's all going to be a check the box kind of, well, if I'm going to work on this capability by going to a couple of courses and getting some badges. That is perhaps one component of the journey, but when you're thinking about your development or your growth plan, there's a time and a place for everything. So we have a continuous learning model, and really the call out that I want to make with this is that it is meant to be very descriptive. It doesn't mean that 25%, because this is divided 4 ways, needs to occur in each one of these areas. It's really about understanding what you want your outcomes to be and how you should play into the opportunities shared in this model in order to do that. And so you have, there's always a time and a place for your immediate needs to just get the job done and keep the train on the track, rolling down the track. But then there's also the opportunities to look into, what am I going to need to grow in the current role that I'm in right now? Or what am I going to need for the future, especially given that the future is quite frankly here. I was going to say it's rapidly approaching, but it's here. And so you're having to do several things at once. But there's also 4 different contexts that you can think about bringing this to life as well. And we call them the 4 E's. Sometimes, especially when we're talking about building capabilities, having someone who you can have exposure to, who's experienced those capabilities, is a great capability builder, that idea of peer learning. Having experiences or stretch assignments that can allow you to grow and evolve some of those capabilities outside of a classroom can actually really bolster your plan overall. And I pulled this, I know that there's a lot of words on this slide, but I pulled it specifically from our learning research because I wanted to just open up the art of the possible so that you can see all of the opportunities that we have as learners if we look outside of that middle ring, outside of that education ring, and go beyond that into perhaps there's other ways that I haven't thought about developing myself that I could pull into a development plan or my thinking around my development and growth as I go about creating some of these opportunities for capability building. And I do want to hit on one last thing that is a bit of my soapbox, and I promise, Mike, I won't get too far into it. But I think it's important to call out this idea of knowing where we're going and where we need to go through the use of data. If we think about just in our personal lives, so work lives aside, our dashboards on our cars tell us a lot. I live in Dallas, and right now we have all of a sudden got hit with some icy weather. And when I got in my vehicle this morning, it warned me icy conditions may exist. I also have regular access to the speed that I'm going. And similarly, we have wearables that will tell us, Chelsea, you've been sitting down so long, it's time to get up and walk around for a minute. But we don't necessarily have that in our work lives. I do very firmly believe through our research that we need to get as close to that as possible, though. It's very hard to prepare ourselves for the future when we don't have regular information coming back to us to help us pivot. And so we term this as guided adaptation, but as you're thinking through how you might want some of this to start playing out for you personally, think about how the types of data that you collect for yourself might actually help you make decisions about how you can better perform. You know, and these are just a few things that we are throwing out here, but ultimately it's this idea that you are truly empowered when you not only have the tools and the resources to learn, so those 4 E's that I talked about, or maybe it is a course that you're taking, but you also have the data at your fingertips to help you know how to proceed forward, and so that you can decide, where do I really need to focus my attention? And that is ultimately the heart of learning in the flow of your work. And it frees up the space that you need to also prepare yourself for the future. So with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a quick rundown of the key takeaways, and then we can jump into some of the questions that I've seen come through.
Sure. Yeah, I had a college professor that would always say, make sure you understand and they understand. Here are the 3 to 5 things that you should walk away with or they should walk away with. So we've tried to list some of those here and just kind of say, we've provided a ton of information here, but what are the key takeaways? What are the 4 points that Chelsea and I would like you to walk away with today? And that's one, we know business landscapes are changing and they're creating new mandates that really have implications for HR. The future is changing, and the HR function has to shift with that. But the nice thing is that's creating new opportunities for HR professionals and new roles. It kind of takes away the nice safety blanket of, I know where to go, I know what to do, I know what ladder to climb, but it provides it, an open space to kind of run and figure out and provide new value that other people aren't doing. And then Chelsea talked a little bit about the idea that, siloed career paths are being replaced by career progressions, these waves that you ride, and focusing on your human capabilities that kind of can be transferred from one situation over another. They're taking precedence over kind of rote specific skills that apply in one situation or to one task. And then the biggest thing is the modern HR learning is continuously learning in the flow of work. So finding those opportunities on the job, not just expecting, their organization to say, here, you need to take this course, or here, go learn these set of skills. But really kind of looking for their own opportunities and finding ways to grow on the job. You do with things like stretch assignments, but also using data to identify those opportunities. Where are we struggling? Where can I provide value? And also getting data back to them for development. You know, what am I working on? How many hours am I spending? Is this providing the right type of value? Is this making a difference? Am I getting feedback from people? So, you know, data has been pretty important throughout this this discussion, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Chelsea. You know, getting that data is often hard as professionals. Certainly, asking for it is not easy, but it's one great way for us to continue to advance our career. So let's jump into, I saw a few questions come in. I think we have 3 or 4 and would love to kind of hit those up. Chelsea, I saw one. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. I was about to cut you off, but you go.
Well, I'm going to hit one. I'm going to throw one at you.
Okay.
Question that says, there's so much for HR professionals to do in so little time. Totally get that. How do we prioritize capabilities going forward? How do we prioritize what to focus on?
I love this question, and I'm going to throw another analogy or a metaphor at you guys again. I feel like, you know, the common terminology when we're talking about kind of reimagining in the past has been we're almost changing the tire on a bus as it's rolling down the street. I think today we're actually talking about changing out an engine, right? While the bus is still trying to roll down the street. So I absolutely empathize with your question. And I think the very first thing I would think about above all else is the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So it's really important to not think that you have to jump into all of those capabilities, because to your point, it's probably going to be a losing battle if you try to do it all at once, because so much of this is about culture shift that takes time. It is about the time and energy that has to go into this. And so really understanding, and it's one of the reasons that Mike and I can't necessarily give you a silver bullet, because we do recommend that time and time again, organizations who are looking at the outcomes that they're trying to achieve and not just throwing you know, spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks is actually going to drive impact far more than like I said, just picking a random capability. So really understanding the outcomes, having better business acumen to understand what is the business trying to achieve and how can we be strategic partners in that, is a shift that I think we all struggle with a little bit, but is absolutely crucial for this journey. Mike, I don't know if you'd add anything. I know I answered it rather quickly and probably not quite as detailed as we would like if we had a bit more time.
No, I think you're spot on. I think, you know, we're suggesting that all of those are important for HR professionals. Certainly that's a sort of our top 10, but it really depends on the goal, that the role or the goal. So, you know, the role that you're in, is data really important, or is it something else like being an entrepreneur? And certainly I think your point around understanding the business is critical across the board. Thinking about how are we adding value and what outcomes do we provide from HR to elevate the business and elevate ourselves within the business.
Now, there's another question that came in that I actually want to throw back to you, and it's fairly similar to the first question, but a little bit different. How do we prepare and build awareness and confidence in HR to transition to the future of HR and actually diversify experiences, that rock climbing analogy that you mentioned, versus having people remain in their siloed function and not looking up and looking around?
Yeah, I'll kind of take those in 2 sections. The first part, how do we prepare and build awareness and confidence in HR to transition into the future? I think it's a bit of what I shared today is kind of showing kind of what's going on around us, showing the change that's happening in the world, what that means for HR, what that means for your HR. You know, this is applicable across the board, but different things mean different, have different weights in different organizations. So kind of educating HR and HR professionals about what's happening and where is HR going? And what does that mean for us in our business? What are we trying to accomplish? How are we trying to elevate that? So giving them that lay of the land so that they have an idea of what's happening around them is how to build that awareness and build that confidence as well, that they can tackle that. And then the second part around how do we diversify experiences? How do we provide the rock climbing wall versus remaining in these silos? Great question. I think there's a couple things we talked about. One is, providing the resources, but allowing people to choose their own path. So I talked about these ecosystems and using external vendors. How do we provide sort of a menu of options to our HR folks? Instead of just saying, all leaders go through this program and all contributors go through this program, providing them a menu and saying there's lots of opportunities here related to what we're trying to do, and allowing them to choose what skills and what capabilities to focus on, knowing that, we've got to kind of give them some guidance and look over the shoulder, but also know, where can you provide value and what can you learn that's new and exciting that can advance your career, and you can add value to what we're trying to do and kind of co-create this evolution of HR. So that's about kind of having that ecosystem, but also, Chelsea, you talked about learning in the flow. So it's not just about training programs. It's about, how allowing folks to find opportunities to grow and try new things and challenging them to do that and incentivizing them to do that within HR. That's kind of the diversification, is letting someone move forward on their path. And it's a lot of pulling down red tape and things like that.
Thank you, Mike. I do recognize that we're at time and want to make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. So thanks for those that have hung in there with us. There was a couple of questions that came in that we didn't get a chance to get to. I will make sure that I follow up directly via email, so you have an answer to your question in the next 24 hours. So I apologize that we didn't get to it during the call, but we'll make sure to get you something tangible to hold on to answer that question. And with that, just want to thank everyone for joining us this evening or this morning, again, whatever time it may be for you, and look forward to diving deeper into this in the research to come.
And remember, in the chat, there's some links if you'd like the recording or some other resources for us. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.